Hi, Viola Rose here, and I'm making a video today to talk a little bit more about Drunvalo Melchizedek and what he has to share about the Mamos, who live high up in the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta mountain in Colombia. And I made a video recently where Drunvalo was talking about his love for the Kogi and the Arhuaco Mamos who live in those mountains. These are the spiritual elders of these tribes, and they are very, very special people. And Drunvalo talks about his story of coming to meet the Mamos in his book, Living in the Heart. And I referenced that in a post I had made somewhere, like if you want to learn more about the Mamos, that you could read these 13 pages that are in this book. A lot of people do not have this book, so I am going to read myself the 13 pages out of the Living in the Heart book, where Drunvalo talks about his experience of how he came to know about and meet the Kogi Mamos who live in this on this mountain in Colombia. Now, on my YouTube channel, you'll see that I have some other videos as well. I have a video interview with Luis Fernando Garcia talking about his experience after learning about the Mamos from Drunvalo and from coming to my Awakening the Illuminated Heart workshop, which I facilitate, which is Drunvalo's work, that he learned about the Mamos, and he's from Colombia, so he went to meet them and be with them and learned that they are actually putting out a call right now for help. And so there are other organizations that are showing up at this time to try to support and help the Mamos and the four tribes that live on this mountain. So this mountain is considered the heart of the world. And the Arhuaco tribe, the Kogi tribe, the Wiwa tribe, and the Kankwamo tribe live on this mountain. They are the four tribes, and they are working to come together to save their land and to create a bridge to the world so that they can share their wisdom. So Drunvalo recently told me that this going to meet with the Mamos was one of the most important things he's ever done in his whole life. So there is the Koalama Foundation, there is Aether and Cord, and there is also Sun Nation. These are just three organizations that I know of at this time that are working to help support these indigenous elders, the elder brothers who understand the earth in a way that we have no idea about. They are the keepers of the wisdom. They are deeply connected, and they have abilities that Drunvalo talks about that are far beyond what normal humans can even imagine. And so at this time, there is a wave trying to help these cultures. And currently, there is Sun Nation, who is gathering resources and gathering donors to go onto a trip in the end of December to go to Colombia and meet with the Mamos and meet with these tribes to start to be part of the prophecy where the Mamos have said that eventually the white man will come back and help them be a bridge to the world because, according to them, we are in crisis at this time. And the Koalama Foundation and Aether and Cord are regularly doing videos where they have some of the Mamos come on and talk about what is going on the planet at this time, that it is a crisis time. We need to be much more connected to the earth. So I thought that this was a good opportunity for the fans of Drunvalo who are connected to me and my channel, of which there are many of you, to hear Drunvalo's story of how he came to know and love these Mamos. And one last thing I will just share is that I have this rare opportunity and blessing that I am a friend of Drunvalo and a colleague, and I spend a lot of time with him. And it is amazing how often he talks about the Mamos and how much he loves them. And the Mamos consider him a Mamo. So when I was at his house recently, he took out his Mamos hat. Like they wear these white hand woven hats, and he has one that they've given him because they consider him a Mamo more than anyone that they've ever met from the Western world. And so it's a very, very special connection that he has. And so let's hear from the Living in the Heart book, these 13 pages of Drunvalo's story about the Mamos. And so the Kogi experience, this starts on page 46 to page 59. It was with the Kogi that my experiences with indigenous peoples began to manifest more than just lessons in spirituality and human potential. What they taught and showed me illuminated the spiritual idea of being able to see within darkness. Without their help, I might never have found the secret sacred space within the heart. For their loving assistance, I will forever be indebted to them. I had just finished an Earth Sky workshop in Maryland in the US when a young man approached me and said that he was sent by the Maya of Guatemala, to give me a message from the Kogi tribe of the Sierra Nevada mountains in Colombia and South America. I listened to him, but I had never heard of the Kogi tribe. He explained that the Kogi were one of the few tribes who mostly escaped the Spanish Inquisition in the 1500s by moving high up into the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta. They were they were accessible and therefore able to maintain some of their original culture and religious beliefs. Even now, they live almost the same way that they did thousands of years ago. Within a thousand years ago, within their tribe is a group called the Mamos, who the Kogi believe are not really human, but part of the Earth's consciousness that maintains the balance of the world's ecological system. The Kogi believe that without the Mamos, the Earth would die. The Mamos are also the religious leaders of the Kogi tribe and are respected in the same way Jesus is respected by the Christians or Mohammed by Muslims. According to the young man who was telling me this story, the Mamos are able to see in complete darkness, and they watch over the world with their inner vision and their intimate connection to Mother Earth, who they call Aluna. What is incredibly interesting is that when a baby who is or will become a Mamo is discovered within the Kogi tribe, it is taken to an unusual place for special training and upbringing. In the old days, this was a completely dark cave, but today the baby is taken to a special building constructed of all natural materials where no light can enter. In almost complete darkness, this special baby will be fed only white foods while it grows up and will be given just enough light so that it not to go blind. The baby also receives a most unusual spiritual training. For 9 years, this baby remains in complete darkness, learning to see without using the eyes, just like the super psychic children who are emerging around the world. At 9 years of age, the young child is brought out into the light to learn how to see with the eyes. What an experience that must be. Can you imagine what it must be like to see this incredible planet for the first time when you're 9 years old? The young man who was telling me about the Kogi and the Mamos began to tell me another story about why he was sent to me. He said that the Kogi Mamos were not able to see any place in the world, but the Kogi Mamos were not only able to see any place in the world, but they could also see into the future, just like the Hopi, the Maori, and other indigenous tribes around the world. He said that the Kogi Mamos had never been wrong in their predictions about the future in their entire history. According to the Kogi Mamos, by the last solar eclipse of the 20th century on August 11th, 1999, all the techno-cultural people of the world should have gone to another dimension of the Earth's consciousness, leaving behind the indigenous and natural peoples of the world to inherit the physical planet. This is reminiscent of the Bible's words that the meek shall inherit the earth. This prediction is also very similar to what Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, said, that by the winter of 1998, the poles of the earth would shift and an enormous change would happen on earth. Many New Age people thought that this meant that most of the consciousness of the world would move into the fourth dimension. The young man moved closer to me as if to emphasize what he was about to tell me. He lowered his voice and whispered, on August 12th, 1999, the Kogi Mamos saw that we, the techno culture, were still here on Earth. They went into deep meditation to see why, since this was the first time in their long history that one of their predictions didn't come true. According to him, there in the darkness, the Kogi Mamos could see lights all over the surface of the planet, and they had not been there before. In investigating these lights, the Mamos found that they were the lights of people who had learned about their light bodies, which in ancient times were called mer-Ka-Bas. It was the Mamos' belief that these people, with their light bodies, had changed the course of history. As a teacher of the science of the mer-Ka-Ba, I know that once we remember our mer-Ka-Ba, we can, with certain training, alter the external world by what we think and feel. According to the Kogi Mamos, some of us did change the outer world so much that a new reality was created. And this was something the Kogi Mamos had not seen because it originated in the future, not in the past. Of course, if this is true, it begins to reveal an even deeper level of the nature of human potential. Just so you know, the Kogi Mamos hadn't thought that we knew how to use this ability within us. Here is an interesting piece of the information. The United States Air Force had contacted me when I was working on clearing up the pollution, when I was working on clearing up air pollution. First with the R2 and then using my mer-Ka-Ba. And in personal discussions, they revealed something very interesting. Many of my mer-Ka-Ba students have been telling me, and I myself have seen this, that the moment that they activated their mer-Ka-Ba for the first time, they sometimes found themselves surrounded by black helicopters. And often the helicopters would simply not go away, but follow them around and stay with them for weeks or even months. A major in the Air Force told me that as the mer-Ka-Ba disk expands, one person in his or her mer-Ka-Ba puts out the same energy magnetic pulse as a city of about 15,000 people. She said that their satellites could see a person's light body and show the image on the Air Force's computer screens. For several years, this caused a huge concern in the US military, but now they understand that this is simply part of the new consciousness that is unfolding on Earth at this time. So if the US Air Force can see the mer-Ka-Ba field, why not the Kogi Mamos? The young man looked at me innocently and said, "The Kogi Mamos wish to thank you for teaching about the mer-Ka-Ba and changing the world in the process." He then handed me a small package of tobacco wrapped in a bright red cotton cloth as a gift from the Mamos to show their appreciation. I was not prepared for this unexpected ceremony, so I glanced around and gave him a red rose from a nearby flower arrangement to give back to the Mamos, and then it was over. After he left, I thought about this experience for a while, but I soon forgot about the Kogis as my thoughts returned to the familiar world of my life. I never thought that I would ever hear from them again. A couple months went by, and after another workshop, this same man approached me, again with a message from the Kogi Mamos. He said that the Kogi Mamos wanted to meet with me and teach me the language that has no words. He then told me that it would be very unusual for them to come to the United States, as only 3 of them had ever even left Colombia. But if I asked, they would find a way. They really would like for me to come down to the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta and meet with them there. I thought about this message for a while and then went into a deep meditation, asking my 2 angels permission to embark on this new adventure. Both looked at me and immediately gave me permission to pursue this experience, whatever it was going to be. I opened my eyes and simply said, "Yes, I will allow this." I had the option of either going to the mountains of Colombia or having the Mamos find me. Knowing my super tight schedule was booked solid for the next year, I asked if they would come to me. Without hesitation, the man responded, "I will relay the message," and he left without another word. On my way home on the plane, I finally had time to think about this. Although I didn't know how the Kogi Mamos were going to find me, I was sure that they would. I have personally seen indigenous people interact in this ordinary world in ways that most people would find hard to believe. Here is one example. The people of the Taos Pueblo in New Mexico had asked me to participate in a ceremony to help heal the pain between white and red man. The ceremony was to be performed by the followers of the peyote cult, the Native American church, within the Taos Pueblo, and was set to commence on the sunrise on a certain day in the future. The day arrived, and the sun was just about to break over the edge of the horizon when three Huichol Indian shamans arrived at our ceremonial circle and asked permission to participate. They were dressed in full ceremonial dress, with feathers in their hair and paint on their faces and bodies. Jimmy Reyna, a native of the Taos Pueblo who was leading the ceremony, asked them how they had known about this ceremony, because those involved in it had been asked not to tell anyone. They said that they'd been in a peyote ceremony in Mexico and saw the vision of the ceremony. Their leaders determined that these three men were to go to our ceremony, so they dressed for the occasion and walked all the way to Taos Pueblo. Pretty impressive, since they had lived 300 miles from the U.S. border, and once they crossed, they still had to walk another 300 miles to reach the Taos Pueblo. 600 miles, and no one stopped them. They crossed the Rio Grande, they walked over freeways, they climbed over barbed wire fences, and they arrived only about 5 minutes before we began the ceremony. All this in full ceremonial garb. Life and human potential are so much greater than most people accept. And so I waited for the Kogi Mamos to contact me somehow, although I couldn't imagine how it would happen. 2 or 3 months later, I found myself in Cuernavaca, Mexico, not far from Mexico City, giving another Earth Sky workshop. A little over 100 people were present, and about 20 of them happened to be from Colombia. One of these Colombians, a woman in her early 40s, seemed like any other modern woman until our group would perform a ceremony, a dance or a chant that was real, meaning something that made the people aware of the presence of God. At that point, her personality would change completely. She became uninhibited and primitive. She would dance with the movements, abandon, and intensity of one who had given herself over to the chanting and music, not something you would expect from a modern woman. To me, it was beautiful to watch her, but the other Colombians were embarrassed by her actions. As this woman continued with her unusual mannerisms every single day of the 4-day workshop, the others in her group became more and more impatient with her. On the third day, the group was in a large circle holding hands and chanting certain sounds to heighten awareness. In her unusual nature, this woman broke the circle and went into the center, wildly dancing to the chanting. After about 15 minutes, the Colombians couldn't stand it anymore and motioned for me to stop her. I didn't really want to because her movements were so beautiful to me. However, out of respect for the others, I entered the center of the circle to take her back to the group. As I approached her, she was facing away from me. I lightly touched her on the shoulder and she spun around. She looked past my eyes into my soul, and her body emitted this strange sound that seemed to surround my body. Instantly, I was no longer in a room in Mexico. I was in a foreign place with grass huts and people standing around in white clothing looking at me. It was as real as reality. A dog even ran by. I was not in my own body anymore, but in a female body watching the surroundings. A strange, unknown feeling surged through me that felt almost sexual, yet wasn't. Let's just say it felt really, really good. And then, just as I was beginning to accept my new reality, I suddenly found myself back in the room in Mexico, looking into the eyes of this very strange woman. I had never had an experience like that before, and I've had some pretty unusual experiences. At that moment, all I knew was I wanted to feel that way again. So, entirely giving up my place as the leader of the group and in the middle of the chanting, I took the woman by the hand and headed for the corner of this huge room. I sat her down, looked into her eyes, and said, "Please do that again." The woman smiled and made the sound again, and once more I was no longer in Mexico. I was in Colombia. For 2 hours, according to the people in the group who had stopped chanting and were watching, I was in an altered state of consciousness. In the short time I spent with her, I learned and understood what was really going on. It became so clear to me. Actually, two old Kogi Mamos explained it to me while I was in this female body in Colombia. They said, "We traveled down the mountain to another tribe nearby, to a woman in that tribe who has special abilities. We asked if she would help us to reach you, and she agreed." Apparently, the woman, whose name was Emma, had lain down on a bed made of thick grass in a round grass hut. Her spirit left her body and traveled farther down the mountain to the bottom where a Colombian woman was living in an old Spanish adobe house. Emma entered this woman's body. I don't know if she had permission to do so, and put the idea into her mind to go to my workshop in Mexico so that she, Emma, could teach me the language that has no words. What is even more interesting is that the Colombian woman had no money, no passport or visa, no birth certificate or any other manner to prove her identity, and no airline ticket. Yet she managed to find her way to Mexico and come to the workshop. Someone bought her an airline ticket, and before I left the US, the angels had told me to give her a free workshop. But still, how did she get through customs without any identification? How did she manage to travel from Colombia to Mexico and back again by air with no complications? I guess they just couldn't see her. What I was learning from Emma, with her strange sounds in the corner of the room, was far more than just how the Kogi Mamos did this spatial transformation with me. With my newly found abilities, I was walking around in the real world on Kogi land in a female body, with old Mamo shamans all around me. I knew that they knew it was me in this body, and one by one these shamans would come very close to my face and make strange sounds. Each time a sound was made, I would immediately disappear into yet another reality, where they began to teach me about their history, culture, and spiritual beliefs. By the time this very real experience was over, I knew everything about this woman whose body I was using. I knew her husband and three children as though they were mine. Two old mamos were by my side throughout the whole experience, and I came to know them like they were family. One of them was Bernardo, and he became my guide over the next few months. I felt like I had just been reborn into a new, incredible world where all the old rules had been thrown out. My old, familiar world seemed more like a dream than reality, whereas this new world was real. My session with Emma ended as suddenly as it began, and I was back in my own body in Mexico, giving a workshop about something that at that time I thought was totally unrelated. Slowly, over the next few weeks, I began to understand my new experience and began to accept the way the Kogi Mamos were teaching me so gracefully. I learned that the sounds came not from the mind, by thinking and words, but from the heart, from a sacred space within the heart. They were directed by dreaming and feelings and emotions. Both mind and heart produce images in the body, but only the heart creates images that seem completely real. Here was definitely a means of communication that went far beyond anything the mind was capable of. I had just experienced the language that has no words, and I was never going to be the same again. I felt simultaneously honored and excited about the possibilities. The language with no words could also be used as communication between all life forms, not just between humans. The Kogi Mamos told me to try communicating in this manner with animals so I could see this truth for myself. Becoming one with horses. Claudette had three horses that lived in a huge open field. The day after I returned from Mexico, I grabbed her hand and pulled her outside to go and see them. I had already told her about my experience with Emma, and we both wanted to see what would happen. We arrived at the field to find the horses lazily standing by the fences about 100 feet apart, ignoring one another. I slowly walked out into the middle of the field as Claudette prepared to feed them. All three of them seemed to be asleep under the hot, dry Arizona sunshine. Quietly, I moved out of my mind and into my heart as I had been taught, and this high-pitched sound came out of my body. I didn't make the sound, it just came out, and the image of a baby colt appeared in my inner vision. Instantly, all three horses jerked their heads around and pinned their eyes on me. Then, as if on cue, they all began to run as fast as they could toward me. When they reached me, one after another pushed its face up against mine. In a matter of seconds, I was surrounded by a world of horses, trapped in the middle. As if on a hidden sign, they all lowered their heads together, and I had no choice but to follow their lead. For the next 30 minutes, I became a horse. We made little sounds to one another, interspersed with quiet whinnies. Images of horses and herds filled my being, and the same sexual feeling I had experienced with Emma flooded my body. I can't fully explain it, but it was one of the most rewarding moments in my life, and I was overwhelmed with joy to be talking with these horses. And then, as quickly as it had begun, it was over. But I had changed forever, and so had the horses. From then on, my relationship with them was no longer one of man and horse. It was one of a family member to family member. What a gift. And in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that my experience in Mexico had been real. Life was getting really good. For those of you who know the Christian Bible, remember the story of Babylon? According to the Bible, before Babylon, the whole world spoke one language, and humans could even speak with the animals using this language. After Babylon, God separated us into many languages, which has been keeping us apart because we can't always understand each other. However, archaeologists have never discovered any trace of this one language anywhere in the world. Why? I believe it is because this one language is not a language that is written or spoken with words, but rather it is created by sounds from within the heart. Only when the heart of humankind opens again will we remember the language and be reconnected, not only among ourselves and with the animals, but to all life everywhere. Taking another person into the sacred space. About 2 weeks after my experience with Claudette's horses, I was at the East Coast to give another Earth Sky workshop. What I had been learning from the Kogi Mamos was still foremost in my mind. My facilitator, who was helping me set up the workshop, listened closely to what I was saying about this sacred space within the heart. And finally, she could not contain herself anymore. She asked, "Could you please show me?" At first, I was reluctant because we humans have much emotional garbage and control restraints, which makes leaving the mind scary for most of us. But she was persistent, and finally I consented to try, not really expecting anything to happen. We sat cross-legged facing each other and began with a simple meditation of watching our breaths, more to relax than for anything else. Then, as the Kogi Mamos had shown me, my spirit literally left the space of my mind and moved into my heart, and almost immediately, strange sounds came out of my body and an inner vision appeared. I found myself just a few feet from the muddy green Amazon River with a massive jungle tree off to my left. The tree had an enormous branch that ran parallel to the ground and extended about 20 feet from the main trunk. With my spirit about 6 feet off of the ground, I observed directly below me a large male puma walking swiftly and with determination. The animal leapt up onto the enormous branch and catwalked almost to the end. From there, it jumped agilely to the ground and continued walking along the river. The next moment, I was back in the room with my facilitator. I opened my eyes and she opened hers at the same time. I looked at her to see what she had experienced, but I didn't expect anything. To my total surprise, she described my experience down to the smallest detail. I could hardly believe it. It worked. Leaving me no time to think about what had just happened, she excitedly asked me to do it again. She reminded me of how I had felt when Emma had first made the sounds for me. So we closed our eyes again, and in a moment, another sound came out of my body. Immediately, I was at the ceiling of the room in the Colombian woman's house, looking down at her as she was sleeping in the bed. It was early in the morning, and her home was old and made of adobe. The spirit of Emma rolled out of the Colombian woman's body and rose to join me at the ceiling. We merged, and together we went right through the wall to the outside. We rose high into the air where we could see the jungle below us and the mountains all around us. Then, like a jet plane, we began to rapidly move over the treetops and headed up the mountain. We flew at a tremendous speed, staying maybe 100 feet above the trees, clinging to the sides of the rising mountains, until finally we dropped over a ridgeline down into the high mountain valley, where a village of round straw huts nestled. We flew straight to one of the huts and passed right through the walls to where Emma's body was lying naked on a bed of grass. Usually the Kogi and the other tribes on this mountain sleep in hand-woven hammocks, but they were concerned about leaving Emma in a hammock over an extended period of time without her consciousness. We rolled into her body, and she woke up to her family standing all around her. Her three children came running, excitedly yelling her name to give her a hug for returning. The youngest, who was just over a year old, went immediately for her left breast and began suckling. Her husband and two old Mamos stood by. I looked at them, and they acknowledged my presence. And then it was over. I was back in the room at the East Coast of the United States with my facilitator. Again, we both opened our eyes at the same moment. Without me saying a word, she began to describe the experience in perfect detail, with one exception, which to this day I don't understand. She saw Emma's spirit coming out of the Colombian woman's body as a bug. Who knows? Perhaps it had something to do with her belief systems. With that one exception, she'd had the identical experience as I did. To say that I was excited doesn't even come close to describing how I felt. Now there was absolutely no doubt of the validity of a secret place in the heart. This experience held such enormous human potential and could truly change the course of human history away from extinction. And what the Kogi Mamos wanted me to do was teach or transmit this ability to other people. Why? Because as guardians of the balance of the world, the Mamos believe that if we remember what and who is in our hearts, we will no longer be able to kill the earth with our unconscious technology. I believe they are right. For the next 2 weeks, the Kogi Mamos appeared in my dreams every night, all night long. They continued to teach me and reveal aspects of themselves that they thought I should know. It was clear, very clear, from these dreams that they wanted me to reveal this information to the technological cultures of the world. Eventually, I did have a personal meeting with the Kogi, but I learned nothing that they hadn't already taught me. They did, however, make suggestions, and I am using some of their advice to teach what I learned, but some of their advice I can't use. For example, the Kogi Mamos said that if I had students stand in a completely dark room without sleep or food for 9 days and 9 nights, that they would be able to enter the sacred space of the heart. This may be true, but it would not work in the modern world. Using my personal experience as a guide, I eventually found two ways that work as substitutes, which I will share with you before this book is over. So that is the end of the chapter about how Drunvalo came to know and love and respect the Mamos. So there's so much more in this book, and so much more to learn in the Awakening the Illuminated Heart workshop as well. And so I'll put links to those kinds of things, and also to the trip, the fundraising that is going on right now to support the Mamos and the peace village that is being created to preserve the knowledge of these tribes. Much love to you all.